Well, I will tell you that we are in for a treat. Well, maybe treat isn't the right word. A very interesting presentation today when we had the speaker prep meeting. I am very excited to hear what Lee White has to say today. He is a recognized expert in autonomous trucking and logistics. With 4 decades of experience, Lee has been at the forefront of the autonomous vehicle industry, shaping strategies and operations for long-term success, and he will be more formally introduced later on the agenda. In addition to today's speaker, we have scheduled great speakers for the remainder of this year. On September 24th, Jessica Harvey, CEO of the Guy Harvey Foundation, will be our luncheon speaker. Meredith Berger, Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Energy, Installations, and Environment, will be with us on October 10th. And then rounding out this year's speaker series is John Colin, CEO of Margaritaville Holdings, who will join us in November. So be on the lookout for the emails, and you can also check back on our website because you really won't want to miss any of these programs. So the Economic Club of Florida really values our sponsors because they are very part of our club, very important part of our club's success. Today, we want to thank the Florida Trucking Association for being our luncheon sponsor. We're going to have Dr. Alex Miller come up a little bit later to introduce our speaker and share a little bit about the association. For those of you in attendance today, we have sponsorship opportunities for some of our remaining meetings. If you're interested, please see me or another board member for more information. I would now like to recognize our trustee members. Our trustee members provide additional financial support to the club each year. In return, our trustees receive exclusive benefits such as attending pre-luncheon receptions with our speakers like today and having an opportunity to speak with them in a small group setting. Our trustee members are also invited to other events that we host from time to time. If you are a trustee member, please stand so that we can formally thank you. So I hear we have I think about 10 guests today. So we're going to have all of our guests be introduced and we'll go from table to table. Are there Chris, any guests at your table? Oh, welcome. Lynn?
I'm Travis Hoffman with Primary Bank, and my guest is Devin Trump.
Oh, okay, awesome. Table back there, no? There? This one? No? Chris, I know you have guests at this table.
In addition to Dr.
So I'm pleased to introduce Caroline Linscott with Navistar out of Chicago, Illinois. And Navistar, as you know, owns or is a sister company with International Trucks, and she's in charge of the interfacing electronically with all these trucks. So this is a very timely speaker for her. And
Well, you forgot one thing. She's your daughter. This table? That table back there? Anybody back there? Paul, anybody at your table? Oh, okay. Ken? John, anybody at your table? This table? Anybody here? Oh, Barney has, go ahead.
the other one is Ramon Morris.
Okay, did we miss anyone? Please give our guests a round of applause. So to all our guests, and I'm looking at Elizabeth because I love her. I hope you all consider becoming a member. Applications for membership are out at the desk out front or on our website. So thank you again for attending today. I'd now like to introduce our head table, Barney Bishop. Barney is a seasoned entrepreneur, public affairs expert, and native Floridian. His extensive career includes founding several businesses, serving as president and CEO of Associated Industries of Florida and leading various organizations such as the Florida Smart Justice Alliance. A graduate of Emerson College, Barney has made significant contributions to both the business community and public service, holding numerous leadership roles in organizations dedicated to family literacy, behavioral health care, and education. Barney is also actively involved in the Economic Club of Florida as a trustee member and former board chair. Doug Wheeler. Doug is the director of the George Gibbs Center for Economic Prosperity at the James Madison Institute, where he collaborates with business leaders and policymakers to promote market-driven policies grounded in free market principles. With over 25 years of experience in government affairs and association leadership, Doug previously led the Florida Ports Council as president and CEO, where he advocated for increased infrastructure funding and global trade expansion. He holds a degree in political science from Florida State University and remains active in our community through leadership roles, including serving as our club secretary and a trustee member. Kyle Sims. Kyle is an environmental consultant with over 15 years of experience in environmental site assessment, groundwater and soil remediation, and stormwater compliance. He holds a Master of Science in Environmental Science and an MBA from Florida State University. As the environment, did I say that wrong? Did you say Go Knowles?
I did.
We just talked about the Georgia, Florida thing, and he's up here. Okay, but anyway, as the environmental manager at Fisher Arnold Tallahassee, Kyle delivers high-quality environmental engineering services to clients across the southeastern U.S., specializing in providing reliable and affordable solutions for both public and private sectors. Dewey Shaw. Dewey is a research economist at Florida Tax Watch. With a bachelor's degree in economics from India and a master's in applied economics from the University of Maryland, Dewey brings a global perspective to her work. At Tax Watch, she analyzes the economic impact of policy changes on the state economy and taxpayer benefits. That means she also works with Dominic Calabro, and he's a former board chair as well. At this time, I would like to invite Dr. Alex Miller, again with the Florida Trucking Association, to come up and share a few words about her association and introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Katrina. It's a pleasure to be here and to sponsor this amazing speaker who I have known for many years. I thought I'd start very, very quickly of why this discussion matters to you. Obviously, it matters to you because you're all murmuring to yourself and worrying about 80,000-pound trucks driving without a driver down I-95 one day. And I understand that. But there's a much broader implication to autonomous trucks being deployed in Florida. We always hear that trucking is the backbone of the economy. To give you some examples, there are 130,000 trucking companies in the state of Florida. 1 in 18 people is employed in this industry. And 95% of all manufactured tonnage is brought to you by a truck. Your Amazon package probably was on 4 trucks, wherefore it arrives safely and on time to your home. But more importantly, which I find truly fascinating, and I'm assuming most of you will as well in this club, is that trucking is really the harbinger for the economy. We can see what is happening and what is going to happen in our state and in our country by seeing what is and what is not on the back of those trucks. And there are so many external forces that are putting pressure on the trucking industry today. And once again, they might not mean anything to you. They might not have any sort of implication into your daily lives. Things like lack of truck parking, workforce issues, burdensome regulations, arbitrary mandates, detention times, and congestion. I leave that one last because to me, that's the most interesting one. Everyone here has the plight of sitting on I-75 or Wildwood at the turnpike and going slower than they should in their car. Let me tell you what that means to the trucking industry. Nationally, in 1 year, it cost the trucking industry $95 billion. In Florida alone, we're the third worst state in the country, and it cost us $7.2 billion. Wait for it, though. If that is equivalent to 460,000 trucks and truck drivers sitting and idling in traffic for a full year. Now, what does that mean for all of you? We're not moving freight efficiently or safely. And it's getting worse. And as more and more people move to the state of Florida, it's going to increasingly get worse. So how can we solve this problem? When I started in the association, it was almost to the day where the federal government moved from paper logs to what was called electronic logging devices. So a truck driver would take out a piece of paper and a pad, write down when he started driving, where he drove to, and when he stopped, so that everyone was following these federally mandated hours of service or rest time. Just about the first day of my job, everyone moved to these electronic logging devices. That was only 7 years ago. We have telematics, we have fleet management software, we have inward and facing outward cameras. And yes, you and I and all of our trucks already have autonomous features on them. So the trucking industry right now, every year spends $14 billion on safety technologies and training. And we need to look to the future with engineers and experts to find ways to mitigate these challenges because they're financially affecting all of us. And the one thing that autonomous vehicles can really do for trucking is mitigate all of those issues that I just listed. So I'm pleased to introduce your next speaker, who I've known and worked with a couple of years. And actually, next week, we're on a panel about autonomous trucks in Tampa, so I'll look forward to seeing him again. Lee White is an autonomous trucking and logistics expert with deep strategy and operations expertise in the AV trucking space. With 4 decades of experience, he works at the forefront of the autonomous trucking industry to position stakeholders in the AV ecosystem for long-term success. More recently, as the Vice President of Strategy for Too Simple, he built the autonomous freight network business model, partnerships, operations, and ecosystem, enabling multiple customers to test autonomous trucking for hundreds of thousands of miles with real freight on real lanes. His mandate spanned all aspects of the network, from defining the business model to engaging and onboarding partners, resulting in a $9 million network with 15 plus customers across 11 states. Today, as president of LM White Consulting, Lee works with fleets, OEMs, and carriers in developing forward-looking strategies, business models, and roadmaps for AV operations. His unique background allows him to bring all systems, planning, operations, and structures together to allow his clients to rapidly adopt, integrate, and scale the technology. Lee earned his bachelor's degree in economics at the University of Georgia. Go Dogs. Welcome, Lee.
It's always tough following Alex. She does a great job. Thank you, Alex. Look, it is so good to be with you today. And I'm going to share with you a little journey, right? First things, let me just start with some baselines. How many of you heard about autonomous vehicles before you got the email about this conference? How many of you heard about it? Very good. Very good. You know, when I first started doing these talks and presentations, nobody's hands would go up 5 years ago. And at least now people are understanding that. How many of you have actually been in an autonomous vehicle? Anybody been in one? Okay, let's say, hold your hands up. Maybe about 10% of the folks. So very good. I was just talking with Doug. He was out in Phoenix and saw one of the Waymos. And so what I'm going to do is take you a little bit where you get a little understanding about autonomous vehicles. Then I want to spend a little bit of time talking to you about the economics that are going on in trucking, some of the things that Alex just talked about, because it is a math problem, right? Supply chain and trucking really has to make sense economically. And I want to at least give you a base understanding of what's happening right now, because that's really going to impact the speed at which we scale, as well as really highlight some of the opportunities. So let's start with the first slide, which is going to talk about one of the business models, which is the robo-taxis. That's what I was just talking about out in Phoenix. Things are moving so fast in the autonomous world. I wouldn't have shown you this slide if we'd have had this meeting August 6th, because the announcements came after. That's how fast things move. But just recently, Waymo announced that they are doing 100,000 rides per week, paid rides per week in their autonomous vehicles. They operate in Phoenix. They operate in several cities in California. Cruise just announced that they're coming back online. And Alphabet, the parent company of Google, is announced in July that they're going to invest another $5 billion into the autonomous vehicle program. This is not something that's just a science experiment. This is not something that's just incubated in labs or test tracks. This is a real business model now. The robo-taxis constitutes one of the business models that are getting applications. The goal for some of these developers is to do it as a taxi service, but eventually to have this technology available for cars that you would buy commercially. There's some challenges on that, on the economics. We drive about 14,000 miles per year, and who wants to pay $100,000 or dollars or more to have autonomous vehicle or the autonomous stack on your passenger car? There's some math problems with that, right? So it's got the pricing of it's got to come down. But I think what we're going to continue to see is these robo-taxis expand out into more and more cities. Waymo's doing studies on advancing to 20 new states or 20 new cities to operate. So you're going to continue to see this density increase. I was out in Phoenix recently and I took a Waymo ride, and I was telling Doug, I really felt very safe in that vehicle. We actually pulled into a little side street, ran into a train, and we were delayed. And the vehicle actually navigated around that, took an alternate route, a contingency route, and got me to where I needed to go on time. It's a very, very smooth ride. So it's available for you. And I just share that with you as far as one of the business models. The second one, the one that I'm here to talk about today, is really about autonomous trucks. The first things I want to talk about is what Caroline represents is what the OEMs do. There is some structure difference in the truck compared to the normal trucks that you see going up and down the roads today. Bottom line, it needs to have some redundant capabilities. Right now, there's a driver in the seat. If the brakes go out, the driver will navigate and pull off to the side of the road. They'll set up their cones and they'll have a breakdown. Well, if you got a computer driving the truck, you don't have that capability. So what we need is some core redundant capabilities for that truck. And that really comes down to redundant braking systems. So one primary system that can steer, stop the vehicle, as well as a completely independent secondary one that can stop the truck. We need redundant steering, and we also need redundant compute. And there's other things here. This is off the Volvo website. It talks about redundant computers, right? Complete backups. If one computer goes bad, we want to be able to initiate a secondary computer. One of the things that I like to talk about here is people are always concerned about cybersecurity, right? And somebody hacking in. Does it require somebody back in a control room driving the truck? And in the trucking industry, the AV trucking industry, all of the compute required to drive that vehicle is contained on the truck. So if you visualize this, they don't need somebody wiring in, remotely operating in and trying to steer the truck or operate the truck. In fact, most of them will not allow that capability. Consider it almost like an iron dome surrounding that truck and how it operates, where the map and the mission that it's running is pre-programmed and downloaded. And that truck is operating from point A in a city to a specific terminal, a specific destination at the end point. And all of that compute is controlled on the truck. And these redundancies give that capability where it's got the power. If there's some sort of battery issue, they've got alternate power sources so that that truck can continue on its mission and operate. There's 6 levels of autonomy that the SAE group has established. As Alex mentioned, the first 3, they're on your cars right now. You may have adaptive cruise control that'll speed up and slow down. Some of you have lane assist. It keeps you in the lane. Those are essentially level 0s, 1, and 2. And then once we get to level 3, 4, and 5, we're talking about the computer being able to drive the truck. Level 3 requires a driver still to be in the vehicle. Levels 4 and 5 does not. Now, the difference between levels 4 and 5, we showed the slide earlier of the Waymo taxi and the cruise taxis. Those are essentially level 5s because they have to operate from the airport to any location, right? They have to operate in basically any conditions. And have multiple locations that they can go to. So if you're in the Phoenix airport and you order a Waymo taxi and you pick a downtown hotel, it's going to say yes or no, that's in its domain. But if you say, hey, I want to go to Tucson, Arizona from Phoenix airport, it's not going to respond to that because it's not in the defined domain of where it can operate right now. But the level 5 is anywhere, anytime. And I think we're a long way from that in the trucking industry. So what I'm going to talk to you about is this 4th level, level 4, which is where AV trucking is going to operate. So it's going to move from a specific terminal in a specific city to a specific terminal in a destination city. There are 140,000 DCs, warehouses, and hubs that trucks and trailers turn volume and freight, right? We're not going to be able to map to all those locations. Autonomous trucking only works where it hooks up and syncs in with manually driven trucks that are feeding that. It's very similar if you think about intermodal and railheads, like we've got terminals that are in Jacksonville that the train companies use, and companies move freight to those on these containers. They come off the trucks, they go on the rails, and then when they get to their destination, they come off the rails and then they go back and be delivered by a manual truck. It's a very similar job model as we talk about how AV trucking is going to get its start. But it's level 4 is really where our focus is as a group. I want to talk a little bit about the economics because we got to understand that and how that's driving and affecting the level 4 AV trucking industry. This is a good graph that kind of shows you seaport volumes, and I think it gives us a good visual of the impact that the pandemic had on trucking and what it did to the volume. You can see here we had in the pandemic hit in March of 2020. There's that rapid spikes. Both the East and West Coast were up over 30 and 40%. You'll see right before that happened, we showed the drops. So we went into the pandemic, March, April, May, we saw some drops. People were figuring out, what are we going to do? And then all of a sudden things balanced out. People realized they were still going to get their salaries, whether through government funds or through them. Their salaries, and they started spending money that used to go towards travel and vacations, went towards Amazon and e-commerce. And depending on which vertical you were in, you saw somewhere between 3, 5, 8, maybe 10 years worth of growth compressed into 1 year. And what we see there is just the inbound orders coming in from the freight, ocean freight, that turned into truck volume. But what happened was, to move all that freight, a lot of capacity had to come into the industry, right? So we had just people that just were sitting on loads. They didn't have anybody to move them. They'd make a phone call and say, can you move my load? And we'd say, yes, but it's going to cost you $3.50 per mile. It was unbelievable what was taking place as far as not having capacity to move freight. One of the things that I think AV trucking will bring to the industry is very consistent supply chain. Focused capacity in these key lanes will add some stability to the supply chain. Again, if you listen to Alex talk about some of the challenges, everything we're dealing with, congestion, parking, a lot of that can get mitigated by what AV trucking will do. So then if you look over the last few years, the last couple of years, we've been in what I'd call a freight recession. And you saw basically it dropped off, right? We started coming out of the COVID lockdown and people started traveling again. And what they were buying while they were under the COVID, they stopped buying. So we started seeing a reduction in some of the consumer activity that's taken place. So if you think through that, we rushed in and we put all this capacity in the market, And then we didn't sustain this 8-year growth cycles that we were experiencing. And now what's happened is we're driving some capacity out of the market. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But this is a good visual for you to see just how much volume came into our networks and supply chains that we had to move. So let me tell you a little bit about what's going on with these supply chain and the logistics company and their path. So I mentioned how we saw all that growth during the pandemic. Well, one of the things that helped these e-commerce companies, the Amazons, the UPSs, DHLs, Walmarts, Targets get through that is a lot of automation in their warehouses. We have more million square foot warehouses in our supply chain now than we ever had. There's been a rapid growth of them in the last 8 years. And the reason that those buildings can run is because there's a lot of automation inside. There's automation that's sorting packages, that's packing packages, that's bringing boxes, it's increasing capacity. It's helping you get your packages on time in a service level that you expect. It's helping them store more options and SKUs for you to order from. They do a good job of moving that out and getting that closer to you. Well, that automation has really trained a lot of leaders in the supply chain to be able to run these big facilities. It's not like they just test automation and test robotics. Their operations and P&Ls now are dependent on that. So we've got this culture these last 10 years that we've gotten people that are very used to automation. I get that question all the time is, are people really ready to adopt automation? They're doing it right now. You just don't see it because it's inside the four walls. Amazon has over 14 different robots that are doing things, picking and unloading. We've got automated forklifts that are loading and unloading trucks. There's a lot of automation that's taking place inside the four walls, inside these facilities. Well, what we're going to see over the next 12 to 48 months is phase 2 of that, where it becomes like the on-property business models, okay? That's where the AV and the robotics kind of move outside the four walls, but stay on property. Now, what drives that is the economics. It has to be safe. It has to improve safety. It has to make sense from an ROI and from a business standpoint, and you want it to improve service. So it's got to improve capacity, safety, and cost in order for this to be economical and really be a scalable business model solution for these businesses that are looking at it. So we're moving from just being focused on the inside four walls to really looking at what happens in the next level, the on-property cases. We're not just running out and automatically flipping the switch and start running these trucks up and down highways. We're testing that, we're scaling that, and I'm going to show you that in a couple minutes. But what I think we're going to start seeing is a lot more of these on-property cases scale here in the next 12 to 48 months. So what kind of on-property cases are there? I'll get that to a minute. The bullseye that we're really chasing is roughly a $900 billion TAM. That's what the trucking industry represents, $900 billion worth of transactions of interstate highway commerce. And that's really the center of the bullseye as far as how we'll do that. And I'll talk a little bit about how that integration and scaling will take place. Here's a couple of examples of on-property. I don't know if you're aware of this. This is John Deere. I believe there's 12 locations that they're testing right now for farming, where the tractor comes out, 24-hour capability to be able to farm. And I love that quote right there. All the farmer needs to do is transport their tractor to the field, get it set up, get out of the cab, use their mobile phone, and swipe to farm, right? Anybody see that? Anybody know about that? Anybody see that anywhere? Very good, right? We've got one, all right? So that's one example. Check it out. It's John Deere, it's Caterpillar, it's Monarch. There's a lot of people in the farming industry that are going after the autonomous tractors, and it will be executed and coming. It's being tested. Let me give you another example. This one came out July 10th. It's an airport shuttle that's completely autonomous. Anybody fly in and out of JFK, if you park there, you'll be able to jump on an autonomous shuttle that'll take you from the parking lot where you park your car, and it'll drop you off at the terminal so that you're able to catch the airplane. You'll see more of this in like employee shuttles where it makes sense, right? And part of the on-property attraction is you can kind of decide where pedestrians go. I work with some clients that are trying to automate ground support equipment at airports, from baggage carts and things that are looking and helping unload cargo as well as baggage carts at airports, because there's a controlled atmosphere. You control where people are, who's got access to the airport. That's another case of airport implementation. One other area that I'd like to discuss and make sure everybody's aware of is Department of Defense. I work with a client that for 20 years has been working with autonomous missions. In the last 10 years, they've had some military vehicles in some of our areas and supply chains that are running without drivers. It's going to keep our men and women, our soldiers, out of harm's way. You know, if there's a convoy of 20 trucks, there may be truck numbered 15 that's got a driver in it, and everything else is being autonomously driven. So the Department of Defense is getting into this. This program was announced this past year. They want 41 vehicles that are going to be basically ATVs that'll be able to operate on any sort of condition and be able to transport our troops without having any issues and be able to do that autonomously. So let's talk about the sources of truck freight. I'm going to shift gears a little bit. That was the on-property side of it. But when we talk about trucking, I'm using this. I was at the Florida Trucking Association, was on a panel for Alex's team, and Bob Costello from the American Trucking Association reviewed this. And I think it's a good way of looking at just the economics right now in trucking. But the main sources of truck freight are household consumption and retail. That's really what drove us after the pandemic is basically e-commerce, all of us pushing buy and ordering things. It seemed like every day my wife was hitting that button and a new Amazon package was showing up, right? Well, we were all doing that. That drives a lot of freight, but that's not the only thing that drives freight. Construction, both home and non-residential, drives it. I was driving around Tallahassee last night, saw some cranes up, and in my mind, I think trucking. I see trucks coming in with material. I see trucks coming in with new appliances. I see trucks that are going to be moving construction materials in and out for those development projects. That's a good thing. That drives a lot of the trucking freight. And then we've got normal factory and industrials. Bob made a comment. He says we're seeing green shoots, so we're seeing some improvement. But I'm going to show you a couple slides that we're not through it yet. You know, I've been around, like I said, for 40 years. I've been through freight recessions, and they're usually defined in terms of months and single-digit percents, right? It's usually, you know, okay, we took a hit, and it's 8 months, and it's 4% down. Well, I think what shocked everybody about this recession is the duration. It's been over 24 months. 1 year ago, like in July of last year, the people I were talking to, the freight companies I work with, they're saying, okay, we think we're at the bottom. And this year it was even further below. We went in another 4 or 5% as far as reduction here in May and June. So the thinking that Bob Costello gave us this last month is that we think we're developing a new normal, right? It's not going to return back to where it was, but we think we're basically starting to level out. And there's a lot of discussion about how capacity moves in and out, a lot of independents, what happens to them. A lot of independent truckers, what they've been doing is because they can't make money with their rates and what they're able to get, they park their trucks and they go work for a fleet. Right? And it takes capacity out of the market. But we're still not at the finish line. And I think, you know, Alex has got a group of every type of trucking company that's represented in her group, and it's been tough last couple of years. A lot of challenges, and I'm going to give you some numbers behind that so that you understand that. So let's talk about what's happening. If I talk about AV trucking, so what the performance of that computer, what it does is it essentially does all the things that we need a human driver to do. So the steering, the braking, the actual operation of that truck becomes the computer. So the driver wages is one of the areas that AV trucking impacts it, but it also has other impacts on this cost model. If you look at this, this is the ATRI, the Transportation Research Institute puts out cost numbers. This represents about it's about 2 million trucks that run every day in the U.S. And this is probably information on about, I don't know, 200,000 or so. There's members that submit their data as far as all sorts of information, maintenance costs, how many miles, what size trucks. And they've been tracking this material for years, and I use it. It's a good reflection of what's going on as far as industry trends. And if you look at the past 3 years, the wage cost has gone up from 56 cents per mile for a driver to 78 cents, a 38% increase in wages. That's been a substantial increase into the total cost. If you look at the total cost, we're up to $2.27. We're up from $1.64. That's a tremendous impact as far as the cost per mile increase. So everybody that's paying that, right, from groceries to all those stores that we talked about, they're looking for alternatives. What do they do? Who's knocking on the doors asking truck drivers to take less money right now, right? Because they're going to be impacted by inflation. They need more money. But if we can automate that, if we can turn that into a controllable cost, right, in some of these lanes, how do we do that, right? We're still going to need the truckers. In fact, I think autonomous trucking is going to enable us to do some things from a wage standpoint for some local drivers that actually make their standard of life and their work-life balance a lot better. Over-the-road trucking is one of the hardest jobs. You take a load, you leave, you go from here, and I'm going to Dallas. My dispatcher sends me to California, then to Chicago. You know those truckers you pull into the pilots in those truck stops? You know how much they have to pay to take a shower? Anybody know? It's $15 just to take a shower. And I may only be in my bed 2 nights out of the month. It is a hard job. There's people that love it. And I got good news. Even with autonomous trucking, if that's what you want, if that's the lifestyle you want, let's go. We got jobs. You may be going to, Boise, Idaho, and back to Montana and Milwaukee, Wisconsin, all sorts of different cities. But that opportunity is still going to be there. If you're a truck driver today, you will be able to retire as a truck driver. But the economics and what's facing these companies, they're looking for alternatives right now. And I think it may accelerate our ability to scale autonomous in some of these lanes because we can help offset some of these cost increases. An autonomously driven truck is a much more efficient driven truck. If I drive from Phoenix to Tucson, a typical driver may touch the brakes 40, 50 times. But an autonomous truck, because it's constantly perceiving around them, it just lets off the gas and then it accelerates. There's studies that show somewhere between 10, 13, and 20% improvement in miles per gallon. Insurance, we got a great opportunity to impact that as well. So there's a number of different areas in that cost model of what goes into the economics of successfully being able to operate a truck that autonomous trucking has the ability to impact it. This is a graph on the spot rates. Again, this is from the ATA. If you look at just over the last couple of years, we've seen a 30% reduction in spot rates. Now, spot rates is only one sector of trucking. There's LTL, there's dedicated, there's over the road, there's all sorts of different levels, but this is just one sector. Trucking companies generally work best in static environments. So if you give me plus or 5%, I can operate real good. If I've got a contract with you for 12 loads per day and that goes up to 13 or 14, I can handle that. If it goes down to, I got that contract for 12 and it goes to 11 or 10, I've got a window where I can handle it. Outside of that, the people that operate in that space are the brokers. So if I run a second shift and I did have 12 loads and now I got 18, I mean, it's the brokers that come in and start filling that gap. Likewise, when it goes down, it's problematic, but that's where the brokers step in and start realizing and get the operation side. So spot rates are down. If you look at just the last year, we still haven't hit the bottom, right? We're still down about 1.9% over last year. So not the radical reduction that we were seeing, but still a little bit of a haircut. So let me talk about the people that are doing the AV trucking. There's about 8 players that are in the space. 2 of them, Aurora and Kodiak, have announced that they're going to be driverless by the end of this quarter. By the end of this year, 2024. Kodiak just announced that they're running some fracking sand in the Permian Basin in Texas every day without driver. So it's running about 21 miles delivering sand for fracking operations in off-the-road type activity. Aurora has announced that in the lane from Dallas to Houston, that they're going to operate autonomously and driverless in that with about 20 trucks per day. So we are anxiously waiting to see how that happens. The other ones that are in play, Gatik has been running really 26-foot trucks, not the big tractor trailer 53-footers that we talk about, but they run grocery stores and post office routes in Dallas and Northwest Arkansas. And they've been without a driver. They've had an engineer in the front seat that's been operating that, but it's a fairly static distribution cycle that they go. They get met by a person that help unloads the vehicle when it comes to that distribution site, but it's running. It's running without drivers right now. And then there's some others there that we mentioned, the Plus, Stack, Torque, Wabi, and Volvo Autonomous Solution that have all come public in different levels as far as comments and what they're doing. So lots of investments taking place. It's been billions of dollars and multiple players and several different ways. The picture of the truck that I showed you, not everybody's got that same thing. They've got different, each competitor has their own different approach to it and what they do as far as outfitting their stack. But that's a good outline of just exactly what we're seeing as far as capability. Here's the public information as far as where the testing has been taking place. We've had some come into Florida. It's been some mail runs that have come into Jacksonville. I can speak with authority that they've been testing on 95 and 75. You've had autonomous trucks that have been on there doing data gathering and different things. And really, when you look at the state of Florida, you know, I just want to encourage you because we are uniquely positioned with all of the ports, with all of the main, we've got I-10, which is a huge corridor that connects all the way to California. We've got coast to coast volume. We've got port volume that we can distribute with the Gulf of Mexico. We've got it on the East Coast, and we've even got the capability to launch AV trucks that'll meet the West Coast. So we're in a unique position in the state of Florida to really optimize and improve network capability. And what I would tell you, you know, there's been things that have happened, like the East Coast, we had the bridge collapse, right? If we were prepared from an AV standpoint, we could have just taken ships into the ports of Jacksonville and Jacksport and distributed the volume all across the East Coast as well as to the West Coast. If we were ready to go with the autonomous trucks, it would be able to go. Because it gives you stable capacity that can operate there. It wouldn't mean that we had to somehow shift in 100 or 200 truckers into that space. So this is where the testing's going. I will tell you that, you know, Alex and I were chatting, you know, 4 or 5 years ago, 6 years ago, Florida was really in the lead, front edge as far as autonomous vehicles. And I think what we've seen is a little bit of shifting over into Texas. One is they've got a little bit more land and capacity and facilities. But there's also a lot of nearshoring going, and all the trucking companies want a little more capacity to help service the Mexico freight coming across Laredo and coming up. I think we need to push a little harder in Florida with our customers, with our OEMs, with the L4 partners, and get some good test pilots going so that we're ready. We want to be fast followers. So when this technology is ready, we're ready. We're ready from a government standpoint and regulation, DOT-wise. You can test AV in the state of Florida, and you can also pull the driver out. And that doesn't just happen random. You're not going to wake up and all of a sudden read a newspaper article and say, okay, there's 30 trucks operating on I-10 and we didn't even know about it. They are working very closely with regulatory bodies, DOTs, law enforcements, and they know that it's coming. Here's some public companies, just the list of folks that have done this, that have been public in testing AV. And I share this with you just so that you see it's the entire ecosystem. I was talking with some of the trustees and was asked the question, well, Lee, how are we going to fuel these? How are they going to pull in? Well, there's Pilot that's actually doing a pilot gas station truck stops is doing a pilot program with Kodiak where they're doing the fueling and even some data work at their location before they launch the mission. So we'll have those that at those approved fueling locations, autonomous trucks will be scheduled to stop in there and pull into one certain lane. Then they'd be met by a human that would actually fuel the truck and then relaunch it and put it back out on its mission. But really, when you look at this list, it's the who's who in trucking. It's also the who's who in the ecosystem for supporting that. I want to highlight the safety program, right? Because I get a lot of conversation. Doug and I were just having a little off the cuff conversation is, how safe is safe enough? How safe do we have to be to make you feel safe about running with trucks? Aurora is a company that's one of the leading providers. Again, I mentioned them. They're going to be driverless here at the end of the quarter. They are going to go live in Dallas to Houston. They did a study of all the fatalities that happened in trucking from 2018 to 2022. There was 30 of them that happened in that lane of highway. 29 of them were in the ODD, the operational design domain, where that truck would have been operating. And from the fatality investigation, there's a lot of forensic information that the police put together. It's weather conditions, it's speed, it's the equipment, what lanes, they measure skid marks. And they were able to collect all of this data. And then what they did is they put it into the simulation. And in every single one of those fatalities, if the Aurora driver would have been driving the truck, the collision would not have occurred. Those 29 families would not have lost their loved ones. That's why I'm still doing this. I know that AV trucking is going to be a safer solution for our roads. Said simply, if the Aurora driver had been in control, none of these fatal collisions would have occurred. You know, I was trained as a driver. I love drivers, and they're great. But I can't look at 360 degrees around my truck at all the time. It would take me 1.5 seconds to be able to see a safety issue and react. It takes that computer 0.1 seconds. Those computers that are driving those trucks are doing 600 trillion operations per second. It's unbelievable what those computers can do as far as that. Now, we still have to turn that tech into a product that can be scaled. There's a lot of things. There's computers have computer problems, right? So I'm a driver. If I run over a mattress, I know I ran over a mattress. I know I got a mattress under my truck. I know I've got to pull over to the side of the road, or I got a fire hazard. Computers don't feel that. They're not in the seat. How do we have that? How do we have the sensors? How do we have the compute to be able to see that? And what do we do? How do we have thermal information? How do we have heat information on brakes? And we know this. That's what we're going to see out of these AV trucks. They're going to be these super smart trucks. It opens up a whole new lane of how we do maintenance and how we prescribe maintenance and how do we forecast information. I mean, it's not just AV trucking. I think the next 5 years, we're going to see more disruption, more challenges in the supply chain than we've ever seen. Let me kind of get through this. This is really a quick overview of the ecosystem of trucking. I'm going to try and land the plane pretty quick here. OEMs, if you look at this, this is how for years, for decades, it's been OEMs, fleets and carriers, and customers. And then around 2000, the fourth column over, the freight brokers kind of came into it, and they kind of wedged in between the fleets and the customers. They started negotiating contract. Hey, if you got extra loads, we'll come and move it. They've deployed all this technology. Alex mentioned that just 7 years ago is when we started going to electronic logs. Well, about 7 or 8 years ago is when we really started seeing advancement in some of these brokers where drivers can use their phones. They can swipe left, swipe right, and take loads and do all sorts of things. You didn't have to be dispatched from a trucking company. The phone started doing it. That's the kind of work that we're seeing in that. And then about 6 years ago, we started seeing all these autonomous trucks. Well, they kind of wedged themselves in between the OEMs and the fleets and carriers. They were talking with both. They were talking with customers. And we've got this unique little thing, right? There's basically 4 major OEMs that make Class 8 trucks in the US. There hasn't been an outside disruptor in decades, but now we're waiting to see what's going to happen. You know, if you look at it, one of the biggest limiters in trucking is 11 hours. DOT regulates how many hours a driver can actually be driving a truck. They have about 15 minutes once they hit that 11th hour to find a parking place. We have a parking challenge in Florida. Compliments to Alex and the team. Got funding for 900 parking spaces. Is that about right? Which is exactly what we needed on I-4. It's a huge issue. That's why you see all the trucks parked on the side of the road and those ramps, because if they don't find a parking place in 15 minutes, they're violating and they risk getting fines. It's a bad deal. So they have to pre-plan where they're going to park. Autonomous truck can run 23 hours or even 24 hours. Doesn't really need to park. We're going to free up some parking spaces in the lanes that we're going to be deploying that. Here's what I mentioned when I talk about disruption that's coming. What's going to happen with the OEMs? So the OEM's going to force the autonomous trucking players to become more like tier ones, people that build, you know, emissions. You think of Cummins engines or Detroit engines. There's all sorts of tier ones that go into multiple OEM players. Is autonomous trucking going to kind of move over there? Or is it more going to be fleets and carriers that are going to pull and bring the OEMs to put in the stack that they want and the autonomous trucking that they want? Or is it going to be somebody like Uber Freight or a disruptor or a broker that comes across and starts buying trucks and becomes the first autonomous trucking company? I mean, there's a lot of different places that this thing can go. And, I don't know what's going to happen. What I do know is I'm going to have a front row seat here for the next 5 years to see what happens. All right, last one, and I'll wrap it up. AV trucking's coming. AV trucking is going to be a part of our supply chain. It's not going to be the whole supply chain. If you have trucking friends, tell them, if you're a trucker, you're going to retire trucker. Okay. But it is going to impact the supply chain. It's going to help mitigate some of the challenges that Alex talked about, some of the cost pressure. One of the things that we joked around, myself and Harvey, he said, Lee, what's going to be the benefit for the consumer? I said, one of the things I'd love to do is go to like the grocery stores and say, let's just do a simulation day. If we did move AV for what could move AV, produce, think of it coming from California, what would be the prices that day in the grocery store? Is it 10%? Is it 12%? Can we do produce? I don't know what those numbers would be, but I'd love to have like a grocery store day where we just did simulation of autonomous prices and what the impact could be for the autonomous trucking. The thing I want to leave with this economic club is Florida is really uniquely positioned with the blue water, with the ports you have, with the ability to integrate that with corridors. 95, 75, and I-10 are huge opportunities and huge trade lanes. Alex gave you the stats. Every large trucking company operates here in Florida. We're prepared. We just need to get ready and be a fast follower. When this is ready, be ready to scale. With that, thank you for your time. Yeah. So I'm happy to take questions for a few minutes, and I think there's a microphone there in the middle, and we'll do that. Don't let me off that easy. Give me the hard ones. I'm ready. Yes, sir.
A very enlightening topic for us, but I have a question in terms of some truck is coming to California to deliver produce to Florida. What are the impacts of individual state laws between California and here in terms of driverless trucks? And what are the impacts of the union on the ability to really get the driverless truck?
Yeah. So 2 good questions, right? So right now, I mentioned 13 states, from Arizona all the way across the east. I got to forget about California. California's regulation right now is anything that is over 10,001 pounds has to have a safety driver in it at all times. And they're not able to test L4 right now in California that way. So California's an outlier. But the other ones have state laws, regulation that allows for testing. You can test AV. Now you have to submit and communicate with the DOT and the State Department of Public Safety. Tell them what you're trying to do. They come out and they visit you and talk with your leadership team. But it can operate from state to state. Okay. The issue is we don't have any federal FMCSA or DOT or NHTSA rules as far as AV operation. I think the impact of that is fleets won't jump in with hundreds and hundreds of trucks, right? If we get a new election in New Mexico and all of a sudden New Mexico says, hey, we've changed our rules. We're not going to let driverless trucks go through. You got to have a driver. And I've put my network up in between Phoenix and Dallas as all AV. I'm in trouble, right? So we're going to have to find ways with the federal rulemaking in order to limit that ability for a state or a city for that matter. California is actually trying to do it where cities by cities are regulating autonomous robo-taxis and what they do. So there needs to be structure. And there's a misnomer out there where people feel like the AV trucking companies don't want regulation. We do. We want it. It's got to be sensible. It's the right way. But we absolutely want some consistency. And I think we've gotten that in a lot of the states, the states that have approved that. The second question you asked is about the unions. The one that's been most active has been the Teamsters and some of the trucking groups. And in their contracts, they'll actually say that they will accept the implementation of technology. A lot of times they put time windows. We need 6 months advance warning that you're going to try to automate that. But what they do require is that you can't lose union members, which I support, right? I mean, if Lee retires and, Doug retires and I can automate that lane where that was going, I don't have to necessarily replace them, but I can use and reassign the work that those people do without affecting the union membership. I think there's a way we can work together and do this the right way. The Teamsters have said, well, they're doing a lot of activity with the states and they're saying it's not safe. It's not safe. It's like, okay, well, tell me what safety certification will you accept? What will make it safe? Let's talk about this. Aurora just did a complete certification by a company called Tooth Sud, top to bottom, complete independent safety certification. What's wrong with that? Tell us what needs to be done beyond that. So, I mean, safety, the safety is very important. At its first, it's foundational. Nothing happens without us making this safer. That is so important to the industry that we need to do that. But the union environment right now, we've got to find ways to work together to go down this path together, because we can't just stand back and say, no automation, no tone. How much more do we keep going with price increases, right? How much more do you want to pay? The trucking companies come back to us saying, what are the customers willing to pay? Nobody wants to pay more right now. They keep coming back and say, hey, I need a 3% discount. I need another 3% discount. This is one way that you can do that. Hold the jobs. Don't impact that. Restructure what people do, and actually maybe turn it into a force multiplier, where if I'm a trucking company and I can only move 20 loads a day between Dallas and Jacksonville, with autonomy, I can move 60 loads a day. Now I've got more local work that I've got to go deliver. Let's go do that. It's increased driver jobs, good jobs. I can coach my kids' soccer team at the end of the night. I can actually make the band concert that I've never been able to because I've been on the road as a truck driver. It is a tough job being on the road as a truck driver. I have total respect for that job. It's a great job. They're the backbone of the company. But how do we work together to make a better, more consistent supply chain that gives us both a path to implement technology as well as have the right jobs for the right people? Yes, sir.
Having spent all my life as a property casualty insurance broker, now retired, I can't help but wonder, are you seeing any early responses from insurance underwriters regarding AD trucking, positive and negative, or just not there?
Can you say that one more time? I'm sorry.
And,
Great.
yeah, any response from insurance underwriters yet?
Yeah.
Uh,
So insurance works off of what? History, right? And there's not a lot of historical information, but the studies that they've seen and some of this information that one of the things that's the trucking industry's been dealing with for like the last 7 or 8 years has been these nuclear verdicts. It's unbelievable. And it's different towers, right? So I may self-insure up to whatever, $1 million. And then I've got insurance companies that insure for the nuclear verdicts and prevent that. Some of the insurance companies are getting very aggressive and really want to get in, and they're looking at safety cases and everything that comes by. We don't have a standard yet for the insurance companies that insure the trucking industry to really give them the answer on that. We believe in some of the test markets, we've seen some of those insurance companies give a lower rate for autonomously driven miles compared to manually driven miles because of the safety solution. We don't have the solution yet for insurance, but we believe that AV trucking is going to enable a lower insurance rate for the trucking industry for those that are putting the AV runs on.
So Leah, I joined Glenn in sharing that this was very enlightening, and I was excited before this presentation, and you did not disappoint. So thank you, and please accept this token of appreciation for engaging with us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and we will see you all on September 24th at the Dunlap Champions Club. The meeting is adjourned.